The honourable member for Portage Lisgar.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is an honour to rise today to speak to Bill C-34, otherwise known as the National Security Review and Investments Modernization Act. But being so close to Remembrance Day, I too would like to offer my appreciation for all those that have served, that continue to serve, and all the families that support them, and encourage everybody this Saturday to make sure you go and attend the ceremony and honour and respect the veterans for all of the work that they have done.
Hear, hear.
Speaking of our security, this Liberal NDP coalition has for far too long not taken our national security seriously. So it is good to see some efforts being made through this legislation. Unfortunately, our reputation on the world stage has taken a beating over the past 8 years. We've seen numerous diplomatic debacles over those years, and a Prime Minister that's regularly embarrassing Canada on the world stage. It seems every time you go on social media, there's a new country's news broadcast, mocking our Prime Minister. And it's one thing to embarrass yourself by bringing a tickle trunk of outfits to wear to another country or wearing blackface more times than you can remember. But the Prime Minister has forced other nations, our allied nations, to lose confidence in us as a partner. Just this past July, Dan Sullivan, a United States Senator from Alaska, called out this Liberal government for consistently failing to meet our NATO's 2% target of GDP for defense spending. Worse, the Liberals are actually cutting $1 billion from our defense budget this year. And while the American ambassador played it nice a few weeks ago and said he's not yet worried about our failure to meet our NATO targets, we all know and can recognize how our allies are feeling about Canada these days. And if we had been taking our national security seriously, perhaps Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States wouldn't have severed off from the Five Eyes alliance, creating their own strategic defense partnership without Canada. With regular disruptions to our ports, to our railways, we're losing that perception as a reliable trading partner that can deliver the goods that we produce here in Canada to market. With the changing climate, our adversaries see the North as an opportunity. They see a wealth of resources, future transportation routes, and we are increasingly unable to protect our own sovereignty in the North. And the sad reality is, under this Liberal government, we've become a bit of a laughingstock on the world stage, and it's disappointing to admit that. But I can't think of a single nation around the world in which our relationship has improved with over the past 8 years. Now, given all of these failures internationally, you would assume that perhaps we wanted to take care of our domestic economic needs here at home, but we have not done that. And although this is a good step today with this piece of legislation, after 8 years, foreign state-owned enterprises have heightened their influence in Canada, and particularly those connected with the communist regime in China. And I'll give you a few examples. In 2017, this government allowed Hytera Communications, a firm with ties to China, to acquire a BC-based satellite communications company, Norsat International. Now in 2020, NewTek, a company owned by the Chinese government and founded by the son of a former Chinese Communist Party Secretary General, won a bid to, get this, provide security equipment to over 170 Canadian embassies around the world. Now imagine that, Mr. Speaker. This government was going to entrust the security of Canadians stationed abroad with Chinese Communist Party-linked technologies. I know there's a lot of examples like this, and I'll end with one more. Just last year, CBC revealed that in 2017, the CBSA began using radio equipment and technology from Hytera, the company I just referenced. They were quite literally using the technology at our borders, while our main ally, the United States, was indicting this company for espionage charges. 21 espionage charges in the United States. And they banned the company from operating and doing business because they pose an unnecessary risk to national security. So at the same time as our border guards are using the equipment, our American counterparts and friends are kicking this company out of their country. It seems as though often the current government is focused on political interests and not our national interests. Although we shouldn't be surprised, we all remember when the Prime Minister alluded to his level of admiration for China's basic dictatorship, and perhaps why they've given China so many passes and why they've allowed Chinese-linked companies and agencies to infiltrate our university campuses and co-opt our research, to take our technologies that innovative Canadians, innovative students, and innovative companies here in Canada are on the spearhead of. Now, we could talk about all of these failures all day, but I do want to address specifically some pieces of Bill C-234. And I was pleasantly surprised that the Liberals had brought this legislation forward, because it is an important idea to try to always enhance our national security, particularly as things evolve and our competitors become our allies become our enemies in this global world. Now, the goal of this legislation of amending the Investment Canada Act to protect our national security is not a bad one at all. But I really thought for once the Liberals had come up with their own idea. But looking back to our 2021 platform, I noticed that we had pledged to do the same thing, that Canada's Conservatives will protect Canadian intellectual property with a strengthened Investment Act. Now, as the old proverb goes, imitation is the highest form of flattery. And there has been a lot of mimicking going on lately. My first speech in this House was just last month on the Affordable Housing and Groceries Act, which was plagiarization, effectively, of Conservative Bill C-356 and 339. And of course, we saw a climb down on the carbon tax just last week for home heating for some Canadians in some parts of the country. So not all mimicking is bad, but at the end of the day, as my fellow Manitoban colleague for Selkirk-Interlake Eastman said, the Liberals are tired, they are weary, and they do not have anything else to bring forward. And that seems to be the case. And while I would prefer an election so that we can go back, put forward a strong platform that will include enhancements to the Investment Canada Act amongst many other things, I do hope that the current Liberal NDP coalition does keep copying a few of our ideas, and that they can start with axing the carbon tax in its entirety. But I'm not going to hold out a lot of hope. But overall, this bill needs to go further and does not go far enough to address the risks faced by Canadians. Now, by and large, the largest threat we have to investment here in critical services is by those state-owned or state-connected enterprises from authoritarian regimes like China and Russia. And Canadians are rightly concerned about this problem. Foreign direct investment is a good thing. We should want to draw investment dollars into our communities. However, we should also want to maintain our sovereignty and our national interests. Now, the reality is we have become a place in which people don't want to do business. Investment in our natural resource sectors, amongst many others, is flooding out. Our counterpart in the United States, who doesn't have a carbon tax, is more appealing to do business with. They would rather go just south of the border, south of my riding, and set up business there. This bill doesn't include the ability for the government to create a list of authoritarian countries that are prohibited from owning Canadian companies or assets, which I think it should do. Now, our Conservative team at the committee stage did a great job of bringing forward common sense recommendations for changes to this legislation. However, not as many as should have been were adopted. But Conservatives did work hard to fix some of the flaws. And one last issue that I think is becoming increasingly important and visible, particularly in my area in the prairies, is the increased buying of farmland by Chinese-linked companies and organizations. Not only does this threaten our long-term food security, but it also significantly increases prices for young farmers who are trying to enter an already very difficult industry to get into. And I think it's important that we enable the Investment Canada Act to be broad enough and flexible enough to have Cabinet be able to make important decisions to decide whether or not a takeover or change in ownership is in the best interest of Canadians. Now, Mr. Speaker, this seems like common sense to me. We know that's something only Conservatives can provide. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the time.
Thank you very much. Just a quick reminder on behalf of our interpreters to be careful with the microphones that are sitting in front of our podiums. So each time we sort of give it a rub, it's sort of really hard on the headphones when the interpreters are trying to do their work.